Sometimes I think I could do with like a timestamp in every single chapter or even every single paragraph for the book to actually remind me when and where the heck we are at this point, because I'm just too easily confused. Which books have you read recently where the timeline just confused the heck out of you? Because for me this was one of the worst. But I also know that's on me and not the book. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kat, and today I would like to talk about The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett. The story starts off in 1968 when Desiree, one of the Venier twins, and excuse my pronunciation, one of the twins returns to their hometown of Mallard. Around 10 years prior, Desiree and her sister Stella fled the town to not live the same lives as their mom, which is cleaning for rich folks. They make their way to New Orleans, where their ways part. Stella vanishes without a trace, and roughly 10 years later, Desiree goes back home to flee from her husband. From there on out, you see glimpses of their lives and their kids' lives up until they reunite and a bit beyond that. The strongest suit of the book is easily the characters. All of them are interesting in their own right, even if you may not like some of them. I'm looking at Stella and Kennedy here. Anyway, the romance that you get to read for Desiree is quite heartwarming and sweet. And she's also a strong-willed character that is easy to empathize with and that I had a lot of respect for. Also, for the flashbacks, a quick warning. If you don't want to read about sexual assault or a lynching, then this is probably not the book for you. Yeah, because that childhood trauma, good grievance. For context, Mallard is a town where mostly black people live, but a lot of them are light-skinned up to the point where they can pass for white. Which is what Stella does eventually. She notices that she can just get away with it, and she vanishes to leave all traces of her former life behind. Which obviously has the downside that for most of the part that you read from her perspective, she's worried about being found out and people noticing, and when she has a kid, she is also concerned about, oh dear, what if this doesn't come out white enough? Whatever. So while her part of the story was interesting to read, it was just a lot harder for me to empathize with her because she just ditches her whole family. I mean, I get in the circumstances, okay, this is more beneficial for you, and you know, especially looking at the childhood trauma of watching their father getting lynched, I get why she's ready to vanish into being white. But still, because she's essentially a rich white woman who also turns out to be pretty racist and passes this on to her kid as well, I find it really hard to root for her at points. Well, Desiree's and Stella's kids are quite different from each other as well. Jude is studious and works hard to get where she wants to go, and always struggled with being the darkest skinned kid in Mallard, so she's quite happy to leave town when it's time to go to college. Kennedy, on the other hand, is just spoiled rich brat for a good deal of the story, completely self-centered and doesn't really give a shit about anybody else. On the one hand, I can understand Kennedy for constantly being upset with Stella because she knows that her mom is lying to her about something and is hiding things from her. But that doesn't excuse her behavior towards virtually everybody else. Personally, the nicest love story or relationship in the book is Jude and Rhys. Literally every bit that concerned Rhys had me on the edge of my seat. because Rhys was born as Rhys and turned into Rhys on his way to California. This being late 70s, early 80s, I think. Transitioning is a lot harder than it still is today. And every time he went out to buy hormones in some dark back alley, whenever he talked about the surgeon who might do his top surgery, is only a bit suspicious. I was like, oh god, at which point is this going to go wrong? And do I have to read about his character dying in some horrific way? But no, Rhys is okay. The end of the story. I think the only downside for me in this whole story, it's obviously not a fast pace. We're not talking about action. This is delving into the backstory of two ladies who take very different directions in their life. But if you're happy with the slower pacing, I was, because it's still a beautiful story. But the thing that confused me was just the time jumps, like not the flashbacks, because those are fairly obvious, at least when they flip back to the childhood to give you some background. But then, especially for Kennedy, it also jumps into the future somewhere. It's like, yeah, later when she would have a career as an actress and blah, blah, blah. Then it goes back into this time, and then it goes back to her childhood and whatnot. And I was just like, I don't know which year we are in anymore. And yeah. And to be fair, it's also fairly easy to confuse me with time jumps like that, if they come without a warning. That's why I say I need a stamp on every single paragraph. It's like, hey, we're going back to the 1960s. You know, this is back in the 1980s. I could have used a stamp like that. Overall, this was a very beautiful story that touches on plenty of rough topics. Like I said, with the trigger warning, like reading about the lynching of their dad was just... That was a trip. Not a good one. The story is artfully written and engaging, even if you dislike some of the characters. I mean, for Stella, I just had trouble engaging at points, but I didn't dislike her for most of the part, once she dropped her racist attitude, at least. Or toned it down a bit. Let's put it that way. And Kennedy. Like, sympathizing with Kennedy was not easy for me. So overall, I think it deserves this cat and the paw, because it was a really, really good story, if you're happy with a somewhat slower pace. Thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a comment, like and subscribe if you want to help this channel out. And I'll be back next week with another video. Bye guys!